my cool idea for a new religion and new marriage is this. You make it temporary. So you actively prohibit the followers of your religion from following it after a certain time period after conversion. And maybe you even actively prohibit the married people from contacting each other after their temporary marriage is over. Greetings, this is Eugene the Philosopher, the greatest living philosopher after the unfortunate passing of Quentin Robert D. Nameland, who has been the greatest living philosopher before me. In this video, I want to address a very cool idea that I've came up with recently. The idea is about how to reform a religion. But then I thought about, well, it's not only applicable to religion, but maybe to marriage as well. Then I thought, well, maybe it's not only applicable to religion and marriage, and maybe like the work of any organization as well, like any big organization, like a secret society, for example, or whatever. But for the sake of simplicity, I'm mostly gonna focus on religion here. So roughly speaking, if I would ever start a new religion, or maybe a philosophical system, I would probably implement this principle that we're gonna talk about in this video, okay? Or, like basically anything that requires a very long-term commitment, pretty much like a lifetime commitment, I propose to reform this, alright? And maybe like if you're a writer, like maybe you can also like, I mean, I'm kind of intending to spark your own creativity over here. So maybe if you're a writer, for example, and you need some cool ideas for world building, you can implement this idea. You're welcome, alright? Or maybe, like who knows, maybe it's gonna become a legit new strategy for society in the future. I mean, regarding marriage, it's already used, at least somewhere, and has been used for centuries. It's called nikah mut'ah. It's a concept from like a pre-Islamic Arab world, okay? So the same idea regarding marriage. And what is the idea, alright? So let's just get it right off the bat. What's my idea? My idea is to make like the religion, again, but it's also applicable to marriage and probably other organizational stuff like this, but I'm gonna focus on religion. So the idea is to make your religion temporary. And what do I mean by that? Is to basically implement a direct requirement in your religion that a person cannot call themselves like a follower or a believer in your religion after a certain period of time after the conversion, right? So, basically, you are only allowed to be a Christian, like, you know, like, supplement, like, whatever the name of your religion is, for like 3 years, or 5 years, or 7 years, like, whatever floats your boat, this sort of time period, okay? So, and how to justify it according to your lore, like if you're developing some sort of new religion, it's entirely up to you, really. Like, just off the top of my head, for example, in your new religion, like, whatever, divine grace, a person can only like sustain its influence on themselves for 3 years and not more. Like afterwards, like if you keep believing, if you keep being a follower of this religion, like your soul will be destroyed or something like that. Like I don't know, like come up with some better explanation if you want. So why exactly am I proposing that? Well, there's actually like a surprisingly big amount of you know, pluses, upsides here. So to the outside world, like when we're talking about like how do we recruit new believers, new followers, or any kind of resources, really, there's a lot of upsides. Like first of all, there is novelty and originality, because all the previous religions have been saying, well, we are the truth, right? We are like forever and ever, and once you become a Christian or Muslim or Buddhist or whatever, like you're supposed to be for the rest of your life, right? This religion, however, is completely new. They're saying, no, you can only be our follower for 3 years. I mean, I'm saying 3 years, but it doesn't really matter what the actual period is, okay? As long as it's not bigger than, like, let's say 20. Like, afterwards, it's kind of, doesn't matter. It's a lifetime, essentially. So it would be novel, so people would be very interested, alright? So they would think, why is that the case? Like, it seems weird, right? We need to investigate. Second point. there's obviously like a very like almost like dirty marketing strategy, right? It's a limited offer, so people would say, like maybe we should try it. I mean, it's only like available for a short amount of time, even though you can enter it at any time you want, but still it sounds like a limited offer. It sounds like something rare, you know, so like the supply isn't very big. I mean, at least in terms of your like personal time resources, etc., etc. So this would also bring more people in. Then we have the third point is that there would be more commitment and like fervor, whatever's the word, like the religious zeal, if we're talking about religion, right? From the people who have committed to it, because again, they're, you know, temporal window is limited, so they would try to use it as, like, to try to squeeze as much as possible from it, essentially. So your believers would be much more zealous than any other believers, alright? So this is an upside for you. And finally, the fourth point, at least the one that I've been able to easily identify here, is that there will be much less frequent bailouts, let's say. So, for example, if somebody has converted into your religion, they would probably go to the end, right? Go the full term, because again, they know it's gonna end at some point, and actually it's like a really tangible point, you know, like a couple of years is a very, you know, again, tangible, sort of time period. So it's not like you've converted and now you have some doubts, like maybe I shouldn't have, like maybe I lost my faith, but here, maybe you've even lost your faith after 2 years, but you think, well, it's just gonna be one more year, like what am I gonna lose from it, right? So basically there's no motivation to, like, you know, slam the door shut behind you when you're exiting it or something to that effect. You'll just, you know, get to the end of it naturally, so to speak. So as you can see, it's a pretty cool story, I think, alright? Well, that's how it looks from the outside. What happens on the inside? Like, what's the sort of like internal machinery of like human condition that allows this to work? Well, you see, people change, right? That's a pretty trivial fact. So you will change, whoever you are. And like, you know, people change jobs, etc., etc. Why wouldn't people change religions just as they do change jobs? You know, like, it's pretty kind of well acknowledged fact right now that you don't have to work at a single plant for your whole life, you know, some sort of industrial plant like people used to do in like 1950s or whatever. And for example, in politics, we also elect people for certain terms, right? In a democracy, or I mean, supposedly we do, right? And because they rule us, and we understand that if they stay in power for longer than, well, a couple of terms at the very best, like they would become corrupt and like everything would become kind of bad, right? But somehow people who sort of rule our souls, if you know what I mean, again, like religious figures, like big thinkers, etc., etc., they are sort of like allowed to rule us almost forever, right? So if you convert into Islam, like you're supposed to be ruled by Islamic figures for the rest of your life, but isn't that kind of corrupt, you know, in this political sense? It is, right? And the same goes for like any sort of philosophy, any sort of like, again, opinion system, any sort of paradigm. But here we are acknowledging this fact, and we're saying, like, whatever we're saying, it's only going to influence you for a couple of years, and then you're free to go, right? So it's kind of honest in this respect, right? And it counteracts this sort of corruption and rigidity and inability to change, which is again a characteristic of any of these sort of like lifetime truth givers, you know. So it is much more honest in this sense, because again, let's be honest, you cannot remain a devout follower of any religion really for your whole life unless you are stupid and unable to learn. Let's put it this way, right? Incapable of learning. So it naturally follows from our knowledge about personal development that it should be temporary. Because again, kind of continuing the same topic, we are right now stuck in this, what I would call a Galileo's curse. And watch my video about Galileo, by the way, it's pretty funny. Where every system, every paradigm, if you wish, has this pretense, whether it's implicit or explicit, of being like the final answer. Or at least it is perceived as such, right? So religions, like philosophical systems, they all have this property, this Galileo's curse. Like, why am I calling it Galileo's curse? Is because the cardinals from the Inquisition, which were judging Galileo, they were saying, dude, you've developed a model of a system, but that's not what the system, like, is in truth. And the Galileo was super arrogant, and he kept saying, no, it is the truth. But right now, I mean, again, read Einstein or whatever, like, the modern thinking is, it doesn't matter whether you use geocentric or heliocentric system, they're equivalent in the sense of, like, you can choose any reference frame you want, right? So, a heliocentric model is just a model, alright? It's just as good as geocentric model. In fact, for certain applications, it's much worse, right? Just as geocentric is much worse for certain others. But Galileo said, no, it's not a model, it's the truth, right? And this is what I call Galileo's curse. Any system pretends to speak the truth, whether in reality, whereas in reality it's just a model, alright? So yeah, and this is like what you can call intelligence, kind of speaking in Dungeons and Dragons type of terms. Whereas wisdom is what my religious system would adhere to, is in understanding that, firstly, no system can ever be absolute, or like absolutely true, in a naive sense of the word. And second, people change over time. So both of these facts can only be reconciled with the way we're doing societally, like things like, again, religion and marriage and whatnot, by making it temporary, right? By agreeing, like, right off the bat that it's gonna be temporary. Like, we're gonna join this society, even if it's only two people in case of marriage, and we're gonna look at the world through the lenses of this society, and we kind of recognize, again, right off the bat, right initially, metaphysically, you might say, ontologically even, that it's only a model of the world, right, that we're getting here. It may be a really cool model. We may really like it, but it's only a model, right? And then we'll have to exit this, right? It's sort of like a Luna Park, where it's really cool and fun, but at some point you gotta, you know, go to the exit. So yeah. It's like clothes, right? You can't wear the same clothes all your life. And if you think about the opinions, opinions are your intellectual clothes, essentially. Opinions are the clothes you wrap your ego in. Something like that, right? And these intellectual clothes, i.e. your opinions, are no different than the actual clothes. You can't wear the same opinions your whole life. You have to change them at some point, or you would look ridiculous, even to yourself, right? Or maybe first and foremost to yourself. Actually, maybe not only. Like, again, this proverb, like, if you're not socialist when you're 16, you don't have a heart. If you're not conservative in your 30s, you don't have a brain, right? Something like that. Like, it's about exactly what I'm talking about here. So, let's conclude this rant. So, my cool idea for a new religion and new marriage is this. You make it temporary. So you actively prohibit the followers of your religion from following it after a certain time period after conversion. And maybe you even actively prohibit the married people from contacting each other after their temporary marriage is over. That would be a pretty interesting stuff, right? And again, if you think about it, it opens up like a whole new landscape of ideas and situations, right? Like, I can easily imagine, for example, a great deal of tragedies being written about this, you know, how, again, kind of the old topic of how everything is temporary, people are mortal, and blah, blah, blah. But this would give it a whole new spin, because now we're kind of implementing this temporary character of things in life into our institutions. We're essentially institutionalizing mortality. Not even mortality, like, not mortality of people, because obviously it has already been institutionalized both in religion and blah, blah, blah. But we're institutionalizing mortality of ideas and points of view from a personal perspective. Like, for me, like, for example, like me as Eugene the philosopher, like, socialism is a dead idea, right? I've been a socialist quite a bit in my life, again. But now I'm not. And again, watch my videos about economics, right? Some of them, like, the oldest videos on this channel, essentially. But now I'm not, and, like, if, actually, it requires a lot of wisdom, if you think about it, to implement this, because again, this Galileo's curse, it creeps in, like every young person specifically, they think, oh, this is the truth. Okay, finally, I found the truth. And they're like very zealous about it. But I'm not sure, actually, like, kind of, that's a sudden moments of self-criticism. I'm not sure, actually, how young people would react to this temporary character of, I don't know, religions, like philosophical systems. That's actually a good question. Another point of self-criticism I've had is that, actually, quite a while ago, when I was sort of like thinking about the idea of this video, is that, you know, even if you make a religion temporary, there is still quite a bit of space, quite a bit of room for corruption, because at some point the clergy, like however pure your religion is, the clergy would become corrupt at some point, because they would start treating it as a subscription service, essentially. So they would start asking you to pay for it, alright? They would say, oh, you can subscribe to Christianity for 3 years for only $100 a year, or something like that. That would happen inevitably. Like, whoever you are, whatever you're building, like, it's gonna happen. But still, at least it's only gonna be 3 years, you know? Like, the whole Middle Ages, people paid to the church, like, almost infinite amounts of money, right? Like, here it would be limited, at least temporally, for any specific person. So, yeah, there is that. And essentially, kind of like a PS to this video, is what I'm describing here is sort of like a society-wide push-pull manipulation. Push-pull, in case you don't know what it is, it's like a conversational device, really. Again, you may call it manipulation if you feel like, kind of. So what it is, for example, you make something positive to a person, but then suddenly, like, at the same time, something negative, right? Or you can start with a negative and then end with a positive. Like, I really like how you dressed, but I would prefer a different color of this suit. Something like that, right? So it's a compliment with a dismissal. It builds the attraction, really. Like, a person says, well, they immediately almost want to make you like them completely, right? So you kind of express that you like them, but not completely yet. And they have an urge now to make you like them completely. So they become attracted to you. They want to kind of, you know, show off to you, etc., etc. So what I'm doing here is the same, but on the level of society, right? So our religion says, we kind of like you, we speak the truth, but we don't really like you enough to have you for more than 3 years at our environment, you know, something like that. So, yeah. And obviously, I mean, it would attract people, just as we've discussed near the beginning of this video. So it's kind of like a push-pull type of manipulation. And I keep thinking, keep dreaming, like in the last couple of days when I've worked on this idea that I've just described. Like, imagine what would happen if in science we've had this requirement. Let's say that it would be like impossible, like it would be prohibited for any theory to be considered true for, let's say, more than 20 years. Just imagine, like, the insane tempo of progress we would have. Like, if you would have to discard the most accepted theory every 20 years, for example. It would be insane what we could have achieved with this if we would be forced, almost like institutionally forced, to like keep switching paradigms and interpretations and models and things like that. Yeah, that would be a way to overcome Galileo's curse, but unfortunately we're still in it. All right, and again, I have serious doubts that we'll ever do anything like what I'm describing here. However, again, if you're some sort of writer, you can integrate it into your world building. Like, you can describe some sort of super technocratic society which again changes its paradigms like forcibly, like it's in their constitution almost, right? Every like 20 or 15, I don't know, 50 years, whatever it is. Or if you're writing fantasy or something, you may do the same with religion. Or if you're writing some sort of social commentary, some sort of dystopia, whatever, you can do the same with marriage, etc. Even though, again, as we've talked about already at the beginning, there is a temporary marriage in Islam, or more specifically, it comes from pre-Islamic times. Even though it's considered to be almost like a glorified oldest profession, right? To be fair, I mean, marriage in the first place is kind of that, right? But let's not open this rabbit hole. Like, we're trying to wrap this up here. And I think I've actually done this already, okay? So I'm actually in love with this idea, at least at the very moment. But then again, in sort of the spirit of the idea itself, my love for it would probably only be temporary. Thank you for watching. The eons are closing. If you wish to support me, please consider joining my Patreon. That is patreon.com/philosopher. See the link in the description. Or if you have a scientific theory of your own and you'd like my help in developing it, please join my alternative science coaching program, also available through Patreon.